Hello again. Welcome back to the next part of A Black and White Tale. And it's Chapter 8, in which we meet Barrington the Mad. Brian had too much to take in all in one go. There was Nell rushing over to him and nuzzling him and crying. There was Squish and Whitetip hopping about like they were attached to springs and asking him if he was all right. And then there was the huge old badger who had rescued him. Did he really say his name was Barrington? "Stand back and let the boy get some air," the old badger said, his voice gruff but somehow calming. Brian felt his lungs filling with air and his heartbeat slowing down to something near normal. He breathed out slowly, then looked around again. Everything was grey. He suddenly felt sad, as though he'd lost something important. "You did it, didn't you?" the old badger asked. "Did what?" Brian wanted to know. "You know. We'll talk more about it later. That was a brave thing you just did. Stupid to have fallen in, but brave to save your friend." "Thank you, Brian," Nell said, her face still buried in Brian's fur. "I thought I was going to drown." "That was amazing," Squish said, his voice full of admiration. "Wait till Colin hears about this." "Anyone would have done the same," Brian said modestly. "Maybe," Whitetip told him, hopping over and planting a small kiss on his snout. "But you did." "Look, this is all lovely," the old badger said, "but I'm afraid we have to get out of here right now. And I mean right now." "Why?" Brian asked. "Because there are people around here. And I'm afraid that if they find us, they will want to kill us. I know a safe place, but we need to go now." With that, he shuffled off at quite an amazing speed for an old badger, and Brian and his friends had to rush to keep up. They followed him into the undergrowth where, concealed behind a bush, was the entrance to what looked like a very old tunnel. "In here," the old badger said. "Even the dogs haven't found this one yet." They followed him into the tunnel and found that it led to one large chamber. Although it was dark in the chamber, Brian could make out the shapes of other badgers hiding in the shadows. "Don't worry about them," the old badger said. "They're friends." So why are people trying to kill you? And did you say dogs?" Brian found that once he started to speaking, all his words came out in a rush. And are you really Barrington? Barrington the... Just Barrington will do," Barrington said. "But you're famous," Brian said. "Can you really..." "Do the thing? Yes, I can. But we'll talk about it later, you and I. What's your name, boy?" "Brian." "Well, if you don't want to get called Brian the Mad, I'd shut up about the thing for now." Barrington turned to Brian's friends. "You must all be hungry after your adventures. I think we've got some good worms left. I'm afraid we weren't really expecting squirrels, though." "No, that's fine," Whitetip said politely. "Don't worry." "What was that about people?" Squish asked. I didn't like the sound of that." "I'm surprised you know the word," Barrington said. Most animals call them no-furs." "Our friend Colin went to the town once and heard the word," Squish explained. "Well, I'm sure that's a fantastic story, but it'll have to wait. You have found us in dangerous times, young squirrel," Barrington said, picking up some worms and shoveling them into his mouth with his enormous paws. "There are people around here who hunt badgers with dogs. The dogs catch the badgers and kill them. That is, if the dogs don't kill us first." "But why?" Nell asked. Why have badgers ever... What have badgers ever done to them?" "Who knows with people?" Barrington said sadly. "Their ways are not our ways. That's where we hide," a voice from the shadows said. "Much as we like being underground, this isn't the life we want." "Can't you just leave?" Brian asked. "Move on somewhere else?" "Why should we?" Barrington replied. "We live here. Some of these badgers have lived here for generations, and anyway, where would we go?" "You could come to our woods," Nell suggested. "And where are these woods of yours, young lady whose name I didn't quite catch?" It's Nell, sir, and I'm afraid we don't know. We're lost." "I see," Barrington said. "That could be a problem. But what makes you think we would be welcome anyway? There are a great many of us. I doubt your badgers would think there was enough room or food for us all." "No, I'm afraid we must stay here until the people see the error of their ways and stop. It's sad, but true." "But you came from our woods," Brian protested. "You can come back." "What, to a place where they called me mad and made me leave? I don't think so." "Made you leave?" Brian asked. "I heard you just left one day." "I left because the other badgers made it impossible to stay. When people whisper behind your back all the time, calling you mad and doubting everything you say, it's time to move on. So I did. The colony was happy to take me in, but now the people want to hunt us all, and until they stop, we have to hide." Do you think that people will ever stop hunting you, Brian? Squish asked. Maybe, Barrington replied. Maybe they will get tired of it one day, but who knows with people? They are strange things. There was silence in the chamber for a while, apart from the quiet crunching as the badgers feasted on worms. You must leave, though, Barrington said. Our fight is not your fight. We must find a way to get you safely out of here and set you on your way home. Rest for a while, and I will think. With that, Barrington shuffled off into a corner of the chamber. Brian found a corner and lay down himself. He heard a scuffling and felt a sudden warmth as Nell lay down next to him and leaned in close. Thank you for saving me, she whispered. Any time, Brian replied, feeling pleased and embarrassed at the same time. What happened in the water, Nell asked. What did Barrington mean by the thing? It doesn't matter, Brian said. I'll tell you about it one day. Now get some rest. Nell said something else that Brian didn't catch, then fell asleep. He stayed awake, thinking about everything that had happened, but he found he couldn't keep his eyes open any longer, and he too fell asleep. When he dreamed in colour for the first time in his life. And by the time he woke up, he had an idea. Chapter 9, in which Brian has a plan. When Brian woke up, he realised that he knew what to do. It was simple. So simple, in fact, that he had to think about it several times to make sure that it wasn't just so simple because it was stupid. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He eased himself away from Nell, who was still asleep, and shuffled over to Barrington, who was awake and watchful. I know what to do, he said. Do you, young Brian? Barrington asked. And what exactly do you know that the rest of us haven't thought of? We dig, Brian said. We do the one thing badgers are really good at. Ah, and what? Barrington asked, gesturing with a paw around the tunnel. Do you think this is? We have dug. Yes, you've dug yourselves a lovely place to hide, Brian admitted, but that's not my idea. I think we should dig to fight. It's an unusual idea, Barrington said. But how exactly? How do you fight with digging? These are big people. They have big, snarling, angry dogs. Do you think they'll be scared of a bunch of badgers throwing soil at them? No, Brian told him. They'll be expecting us to run away. They won't expecting us to be clever. Clever is not something we are usually famous for, Barrington said. How do you suggest we start? Well, you said that the people always arrive in their boxes at the same place, didn't you? Yes, Barrington replied. I think they call it the carp ark, although what fish have to do with it I have never understood. They stop there and then come into the woods. They let the dogs out and go and then follow them, yes. Good. All we have to do is dig a tunnel all around this carp ark, then, Brian said, something very pleased with himself. Well, there are tunnels all round here, Barrington replied. How will more tunnels help? Because these will be different tunnels. These will be bad tunnels. We normally dig deep so that the tunnels don't collapse. We're going to dig tunnels close to the surface, tunnels that are meant to collapse. When the big, heavy people stand on them, the tunnels will give way and they'll fall in. Barrington thought for a moment. Do you know how big people are? He asked. Have you ever seen one? Of course I have, Brian replied indignantly. So how long do you think it would take us to dig a tunnel all around the carp ark that is so deep that a person could not just climb out? Well, of course they'll climb out, Brian said. I know we can't dig that deep, but they might hurt themselves. It might make them think it's too dangerous here and make them go somewhere else and leave you alone. But it would certainly give us enough time to get away. You know these woods better than the people. And what do you suggest we do about the dogs? Barrington wondered. You know, the dogs who are lighter than the people, the dogs who can just jump over the whole tunnel or scramble out of them, the dogs who don't need to know the woods because they can follow us by scent. Brian was about to reply but stopped. He knew that Barrington was right. He had thought about the people, but he hadn't thought about the dogs. No, you're right, he said sadly. It was a stupid idea. No, it wasn't, a voice said, and Brian looked round to see Nell standing behind him. You just need to think it through, she said. I have thought it through, Brian answered. I've thought about it for ages. Yes, and you're nearly there. But your idea means that people have to get out of those boxes they travel in, don't they, Mr. Barrington? This car park thing, what is it? Is it one people have made, or is it just a bit of ground they use? It's just a flat bit of field, Barrington replied. And is it just these nasty hunting people who use it as well? Well, I've only ever seen the hunters there, young lady. Why? Because we need to dig under this car park. Nell said triumphantly. We dig near the surface, like Brian said, but when the people drive their boxes onto it, the car park collapses. Brian and Barrington stared at Nell. They stared so long that she got embarrassed and had to look away. Then Barrington spoke. He spoke slowly and thoughtfully. Do you know? He said that might just work. It will certainly stop them ever using the car park again. We could certainly try it. We better wake everyone up then, we have a lot of digging to do. At first the other badgers were rather grumpy at being woken up for what they thought was a ridiculous and pointless day of digging, but it became clear they had a great deal of respect for Barrington and would follow wherever he led. Squish and Whitetip wanted to help, but squirrels were only good at digging small holes, so Nell suggested they acted as lookouts, so that the badgers could be alerted if the people came early. They scampered obediently up a tree on the edge of the car park and kept watch. From their vantage point, they watched as a group of badgers led by the large figure of Barrington disappeared one by one into the ground. The two squirrels had gathered a small stash of acorns to take with them because it looked like being a long day. It was a long day for the badgers too. Brian had never seen badgers dig so quickly. They had to be careful not to dig too close to the surface in case the tunnels collapsed while they were digging them, but close enough so that the tunnels would fall in when the people drove onto them. All day they dug. Even Nell dug like she'd never had before. Brian kept having to steer her in the right direction because she couldn't see very well which way she was going, but she dug until her paws ached. On and on the badgers dug, hardly talking, just digging and pausing, only to grab a few worms while they worked. A few times Brian met with Barrington. He was concerned that the old badger might be finding the hard work difficult, but with his massive paws, Barrington was shifting more soil than any two badgers put together and was hardly out of breath. As Brian emerged from one hole to go down another, he could see that the sky was getting darker. Can you see anything yet? He called up to Squish and Whitetip. Not yet, Squish called back, his voice slightly indistinct because he was speaking through a mouthful of acorn. Brian was just about to turn back when suddenly Squish called again. No, wait, the squirrel shouted, nearly choking on his acorn. I can see lights. They're getting closer, quick, Whitetip joined in. They're coming. Brian darted as quickly as badgers can dart into the nearest tunnel and shouted at the top of his voice. Everyone out, he yelled, the hunters are coming. One by one, the badgers hurried past him and out of the tunnel. They all scurried off into the bushes to wait, all bar one. Where's Barrington? Brian asked the last badger who passed him. Still there, the badger replied. Said he had a bit more to do. Brian peered into the tunnel. Barrington, he called. Barrington! Come out, we have to get out now! Go on, a booming voice replied from deep in the tunnel. I'm nearly done. I'll help you, Brian suggested. Tell me where you are. I'm best on my own, Barrington called back. I may be old, but no one can shift soil like me. You have to come too, Brian shouted. We need you. You need me to finish here, Barrington answered. Now go. Your young lady and your friends need you. Somewhere nearby, Brian could hear the unmistakable rumbling and roar of the hunters approaching. Bright light lit up the approach to the field. Brian knew Barrington would not be moved, and reluctantly headed off into a hedge where Nell was waiting. I hope we were right, Nell said. We better had be, Brian replied, a catch in his voice. Barrington's still down there. This can't all be for nothing. So come back tomorrow for the final part of A Black and White Tale. Thank you.